So our guest for tonight serves as the Associate Dean for Admissions and Enrollment Management at the University of Miami School of Law. And she provides strategic leadership, policy direction, and operational oversight for the offices of admissions, enrollment management, and student recruitment. She previously served as the Assistant Dean for Admissions at the University of Maryland School of Law, the same school she received her JD from. And she's a member of the Law School Admission Councils, or LSACs, Board of Trustees, and the chair of the Schools and Candidates Committee. She has also served as an evaluator of scholarship applicants for the Gates Millennium Scholars Program, the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, and the Schwarzman Scholars Program. Wow, that's a lot. So thank you so much, Dean Katrine Hussman-Stroll, for taking the time to do this interview. To start things off, could you give us a little background as to what led you to be the Dean at Miami Law?
So I have actually been in admissions now close to 12 years. It wasn't something that when I was in law school, I thought I was going to be the dean of admissions someday at a law school. It was more something that while I was in law school, I had the opportunity to work with one of the associate deans at the University of Maryland, and as a research assistant. And through that opportunity, he opened my eyes to enrollment management and admissions, and really offered me my first opportunity in admissions during my third year of law school. So I really fell into it, so to speak, and loved it ever since. So I have been now 12 years in it, and I started at University of Maryland and was the assistant dean for admissions there for a while, and then transitioned to University of Miami in 2020, right before the pandemic, actually 3 weeks exactly before the pandemic. It's been great. It's my new home.
That's amazing. I mean, 12 years, more than a decade. In that span of you being in the admissions field, what can you say would be the most rewarding? Because you said that you enjoyed it, or you still enjoy it, right? What is the most rewarding aspect of being an admissions officer?
I think the same thing that caught my attention from the beginning. It's working with students and helping students navigate a very complicated journey to the law school process. It doesn't have to be that complicated. I'm a first generation college student, and I'm someone who had a difficult time navigating the application process. So now being on the other side and being able to really show students kind of how to navigate the process in a much easier way. I think I'm one of those deans that people know you can just call, and I always have my information out there. I'm very easy to find on our website, and I want to help students navigate the process. It doesn't have to be a daunting process, and that's what we're here for. And the most rewarding experience, I think, is being at the graduation. I think that's probably the most rewarding experience, where you see a student that I maybe met as a sophomore or junior in college, and they were very, very early on looking at the application process. And I was maybe one of the first people they talked to about it. And they were surprised, like, oh, this is maybe not so bad. And then got the idea of going to that school, and seeing them go through the journey of law school and grow in law school to be the lawyer that they want to be. I think it's certainly the most rewarding, and just seeing their graduation and be like, see, I told you in sophomore year you're going to be fine. And now seeing them in the world, I've had enough years now that I've been able to see many of the people that I've helped along the way become amazing lawyers and leaders around the country. So that's certainly rewarding, and it kind of makes sure that gives me that fuel every day to continue to help students.
I'm glad that you shared that particular part wherein you said that you were once at the other end, and then you were having, of course, you experienced certain challenges. If you were to tell somebody, or if you were to tell yourself certain advice, your sophomore or your freshman self, what would it be? Because I think it would be very helpful to a lot of law students who are a bit nervous, or you can say they don't really know if they can reach out to admissions officers, or they feel like um, they're lost a bit in this whole admissions process. What would be your advice, or what would be, something that you would say?
Don't be afraid to reach out for help. That's the whole point of us being here. Now, that comes with a caveat from an admissions person in that start early, start that process early. If you're a freshman, sophomore in college and are listening to this and, you're like, maybe I want to be a lawyer, maybe I don't wait until you're a junior or senior in college and you're, taking the LSAT and kind of things, there's a checklist coming your way and you're trying to navigate everything at once to ask for help. Come to events. We all put amazing events to be able to help you navigate law school or even learn about law school. Most law schools around the country have some type of offering that allows you to sit in a law school class, in a real law school class. With the pandemic, actually, many law schools opened online options. So you can sit in an online class and actually get to experience law school. It's not the same, but you do get to feel what it would be like to be in law school, surrounded by like-minded people and kind of learning a new language. And that really allows students to see themselves in law school. So I would say, first of all, take advantage of every opportunity that's out there, especially when you're a freshman and sophomore, and you're still kind of learning about the different programs. But also don't be afraid to reach out for help. I am the kind of person that always puts my information out there, and a handful of people take me up on it. Whether it's, pre-pandemic, it was like, meet me for coffee or come on campus. Soon you'll be able to do that again. So starting in August, if you want to meet me for coffee on campus, everything will be back and opened. So visitors can come in and set up time. And I know that many of my colleagues feel the exact same way. So reach out to us. Don't be afraid of asking questions. I think once you're in the cycle, things get a little bit more complicated because you become an applicant. While you're a prospective student and you're still learning about the program, and maybe it's a year or two before you're starting to apply, there's a lot of room to kind of get to know us, get to know the schools, and just ask questions. And even if you're not quite interested, but I happen to be your regional school, similarly with my colleagues, reach out to your regional law school. They know, the pipeline of students that are coming from your institution. They know the programs in your area in terms of, prep programs, other programs that are in the area. To introduce you to the legal profession. They have relationships with your local bars. So they're really able to provide you a lot of resources from the get-go. So don't be afraid to connect.
um it's good that you said that too, that it's never too early to start, especially for a lot of students who have just completed the June LSAT. I mean, well, that's one of the things that maybe they're thinking about, like, oh, is it too early to talk to an admissions officer? I just, finished the June LSAT. I hope you don't mind if I jump in and ask you more specific things about that. How does Miami law regard multiple scores with the June LSAT? And I think a lot of people now want to find out if Miami law, or how does Miami law view scores related to the various LSAT formats? I mean, with COVID happening, there was a shift with the LSAT format, and we'd like to know, does that affect the
Yes. So Miami law, as most law schools in the country, we look at your highest score the most. We're able to see all of your scores, and we are able to see kind of all of the score bands and everything as part of your credential assembly report that comes from LSAC. But we place the most weight in terms of the highest score you received. And I think more and more the people who are kind of, again, behind the scenes, I took the LSAT. So I know how hard it can be and how much work it takes, and that it's not a simple test. And regardless of the format, it's not a simple test. So I know what goes into it. And, everyone's allowed to have a bad test day. And if that happened, that's why we encourage students to take the LSAT multiple times so that you can give us your best score. And sometimes that doesn't happen the first time. Sometimes that doesn't happen the second time. Sometimes that happens the third time. So I would say on average, I always encourage to take the test at least twice, just because generally, students tend to do better the second time around. have more confidence, they're more experienced, and so on. So that's definitely what I would say in terms of multiple scores. In terms of the other question, but I do think it's coming up a lot, we as admissions officers are relying on the LSAT regardless of the format. I mean, the format only changes kind of the way that the, obviously the test is given. And I do think there's something to say about the fact that when students are at home in their own environment and they feel comfortable, and they're not watching, you didn't have my experience necessarily where, I'm watching 30 other people all really, really nervous, taking the exam with you right next to you. And you can almost like hear them sweat, which I think really makes it much more difficult to concentrate for some people. You don't have to face that. So, there's something to say about the difference in format. Regardless of the format, though, the LSAT exam is still the only exam that tests the skills necessary for success in the first year of law school. So that hasn't changed, whether it's a remote or whether is, again, in the future in person, it still is the same test. It is the exact same questions, that have been authenticated and validated through the LSAC process in the same way. It's just a format that's a little differently, and certainly the amount of sections. So we had 3 sections. Now we're going back to 4, where, there's going to be an unscored section, but the test questions are relatively the same, and they have gone through the same process and vetting process, which I think makes the test in that way equally valuable regardless of the format.
I think that eases a lot of questions around that, especially with the shift to the 4-section format. Like, would law schools be more, considerate of people taking that, or would they regard that highly, right? Like compared to the others formats before. So it helps that you actually mentioned that it doesn't matter regardless of format. The law school would most likely check and see the score itself, right? Okay, cool. It makes it a lot easier for us. So Miami Law is well known for its IMCP, right? Which is the for those of you for those who are watching, International Moot Court Program, and a lot of the opportunities it gives students to participate in competitions and related activities. So, what does it take to stand out among other talented candidates? If you have a lot of these competitive participants, or at least candidates, A-type personalities getting into Miami Law, can you give us
For law school or for the moot court program?
I think for law school, like because I know a lot of students, they consider that, right? Like when they get into a particular law school, okay, what are the programs available there? That would sometimes be a factor as to why I'm gonna apply into a particular law school, or what they're known for. Like I know Miami Law is known also for tax law and things like that. So I think in general, what would be the what does it take to stand out among a lot of students that you interview, or look at application?
Absolutely. I mean, that's, I would say, a difficult question to answer because we're not looking for a specific type of student. We don't have a specific mold that attends to an extent Miami Law. We look for students from all walks of life with very different backgrounds, starting with the fact that we have over 18 areas of study available in our curriculum. We offer one of the larger curriculums in the country with 300 plus courses per academic year. So students really have a wide gamut of options available to them. We have 17 clinics and practicums. We have many, many internships and externships available, in the city of Miami, but also through our DC semester program and other city programs available where students can enter elsewhere. So the school really has all of these different type of opportunities that we're looking for students from all over the world, certainly from, all states that are applying to our program. And we really want to make sure that we encourage students from all backgrounds to apply to the program. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're a political science major or a biology major, or you're somebody who has no work experience versus 3+ years of work experience. We want well-rounded students that are ready to take on this academic challenge and that really want to be part of a school that's exciting and that has a lot of amazing, very different type of courses. You know, whether you want to study sneaker law, or you want to, you know, be part of our litigation program, or you want to be part of our intellectual property program, or our business law program, or, you know, our ranked international law program. It's really a school that you can do so many things, and it's in an exciting place, which is Miami, that has, you know, one of the strongest international bases in the country, is a startup hub in the country now, and it's really, you know, a great place to be, where students really enjoy themselves. I mean, the beach is close by, and so we certainly have a very much a wellness mindset to make sure that our students are healthy and happy going to law school here. And that really makes a difference here. So I do think that when students are looking at our program, they should look at the programs that we offer, and certainly the different types of clinics and what really aligns with the career they want to have. They should look at our alumni network, which is over 24,000 alumni worldwide, and see themselves in that alumni and see kind of which paths have been taken before. But we're also an innovative program. So we have one of the first technology law programs in the country, and it really shows kind of, we're trying to make sure that our curriculum stays cutting edge and making sure that it is reflective of the needs of the profession. So we look for students who want to be part of that. So to an extent, I don't think there's a particular mold. And in terms of standing out in the application process, you know, I know the next question is something along the lines of, well, how do you do that when you have a personal statement of 2 pages? I think being genuine and being honest with us about what you want to do with your law degree, why our school is a good match for your career goals, and how do you think our program will propel you to, you know, to your career. And, you know, we want to make sure that we're a good match to an extent, that we have the resources that are going to help you navigate the process, and obviously you know, be part of an exciting academic experience. But we also want to make sure that we have kind of what you're looking for in a law school. So I think to an extent, the personal statement is that match. And often students focus too much on what they think we want to hear, and not necessarily what's true to them. And I think the best advice I can give about that is to make sure that students really focus on showing themselves to us, and as if we were talking right now, and really focus on making sure that their statements highlight the journey that got them to that point, and where they want that journey to go through the law school process and beyond. And just imagine yourself that there's people that have been through your shoes before, that you're writing to. It's not just this kind of nebulous, you know, committee, or it's people that have been in your shoes and that really want you to succeed, and that are looking to admit you, not deny you. We are looking to admit you. So give us the reasons to admit you, and make sure that you have the strongest package possible for law school, including a personal statement that really showcases who you are and why you're excited to be part of our program.
I think you guessed my mind, and a lot of those who are probably watching and joining us today, that that was the next question. Like, what do we put in our personal statement if we want to get into Miami law or any law school that we're aiming for? And I know that you've read and you've seen hundreds of these personal statements, diversity statements, all of these admissions essays. And it is a challenge, especially after taking the LSAT, to sit down and write these essays. What would be your top tips? I know you mentioned already, be yourself. That's difficult. Like in 2 page, how can you showcase yourself, right? But what would be your top tips, knowing that you've also experienced this before? You've sat down and, you know, tried to write that personal statement years ago, though. But yeah.
No, absolutely. I think that we could have a whole hour conversation just on personal statements to an extent, and so I'll try to boil it down to a few pointers. So I think students should really think about the role of the personal statement in the application and how it ties your entire application. So to an extent, think of a personal statement as like the glue that puts all of the other pieces together. Often students focus so much on the application as a checklist, completed my resume, check, completed my personal statement, check, completed these documents, check. But they don't really think of it like the way that we see it, which is your personal statement and kind of the rest of your application included is really painting a picture of who you're going to be in our classroom and what kind of student you're going to be and how you're going to contribute to our student body and the legal profession to an extent. So we want to make sure that when you're thinking about the personal statement, you're thinking about the role that it plays in your application. And, think about also, I would say the second thing is think about the audience. So who is behind, the reviewing your application? It's faculty, it's alumni, it's administrators, people who have been through your shoes in terms of making sure that they have been through the process like you and have applied to law school. They are all lawyers at Miami Law and have a good sense of the skills that are needed. Certainly writing skills are very important. So I would say I can't, not mention the fact that you want a well-written statement and every aspect in terms of grammar and making sure that you really spend some time in making sure it's the best polished piece that you can provide. Why? Because it's a reflection to an extent of your character. We want to make sure that you're taking this process seriously. And a sloppy personal statement tells us you are not taking this process seriously. And so I want, that's another piece that I would say make sure students focus on that it's a very, very well written statement. That said, it's a conversational statement almost and not a formal statement. You're not writing a paper for your class. You're writing, to an extent, your hopes and dreams in a way that you're sharing with us. But there's a line in terms of too much personal information. It is still a statement for a professional institution that you're trying to get into in terms of the academic experience. So you want to make sure that there's a good balance between personal and making sure you keep it professional. Personal because we want to know why you want to be a lawyer and why you want to be part of our program. But to an extent, also, we want to make sure that you bring the right character and you are fit to be a lawyer. And that's all part of kind of the review process of the law school application process.
Yeah, the balance there is key. And also the challenge, I think, to see whether it's too personal or it's too formal. Can you say this might be a controversial question, but can you say that a well-written admissions essay can make up for a lower LSAT score?
So it depends, right? And that's a very good lawyer answer, right? It depends. So I think a personal statement could break a tie. Let's just say if there's two students who are relatively the same in other aspects in terms of academic credentials and in terms of kind of background in terms of work experience and maybe activities in college, but then we get to the personal statement and one personal statement just makes the student stand out. It's not that you were saying the right things, is that when you shared a little bit of who you are as an applicant, we believed you, and now we're like, this person needs to be part of our program, and now you just made it really easy to choose you versus the other students. So I don't think that it makes up for academic credentials necessarily, but it certainly makes sure that you have a lead over other applicants that have similar academic credentials. And what I'll say about academic credentials, because I do think it comes up a lot, in terms of the questions about whether, will I be able to get into your program and so on. You have to think of the application review process. It's a holistic approach. And What does that mean? We look at everything. And when students say, again, we look at everything, they think of a checklist, and that's not how we view it. Ultimately, we are an academic institution admitting students that we want to make sure are able to succeed in our program. So we have many questions when we look at the file, but there's one very important question that as an admissions officer, we have to be able to answer for your file to continue the review process. And it is whether you have the academic credentials to succeed academically in our program. If the answer to that question is no, then the rest of the application to an extent is moot. If the answer to that question is maybe or yes, then we continue to an extent. So we are, to an extent, have a duty to the student to ensure that if we do not believe you have the academic ability to succeed in our program, we're not going to admit you. We don't want to admit students who we don't believe are going to do well in our program. And yes, there's, the LSAT and the undergraduate GPA in that academic question, but there are also the letters of recommendation from faculty members, which are counted in terms of the process of the academic evaluation. We look at obviously all of the other factors as well, but those three factors weigh the most in the academic consideration. So that's why many law schools like Miami stress the fact that we want faculty letters for your recommendation section. We allow you to have up to 4, but at least 2 of them should be from faculty members if you can. We understand that things happen and not all students are able to provide them, but you're going to put yourself in an advantageous position if you're able to provide positive recommendations for faculty members that you were their student and they can talk about how great of a student you are and how you have the ability and the skills to academically succeed in our program.
I mean, Dean Schroll, you said that it's not a checklist, but as you're saying this, I have a mental checklist of things that you've actually just said, like, okay, GPA, the LSAT score, the factors, those are the 3 major factors. And of course, the letters of recommendations too should come from, faculty officers. And then you also said something about the admissions essays. You mentioned, of course, other factors, and I know that it will take a lot of time to detail other factors, but can you just give us like a bit of a peek of what would be the other factors that would affect or at least play a role in decisions of admissions officers like you?
Absolutely. So there are other questions we have to answer. So that's just one question about the academic piece, but we have to answer the question whether, how we think you're going to contribute to our student body. How do we think you're going to contribute to the legal profession? And those questions are harder to answer. So to an extent, we look at your work experience, so your resume, and what have you, how have you spent your time outside of an academic experience? Are you involved on campus? Are you involved in sports? Are you involved in your community? Have you gained work experience, and how much work experience and what type of work experience have you gained? Have you had to work while you were going to college, and how have you been able to balance that with, the academic experience that you had before? We certainly look at the personal statement to learn a little bit more about you. We also look at letters from other folks outside of faculty to see kind of what they have to say about, yes, your skills that you bring to the law school, but also your character and your desire to be a lawyer. Often those folks know a lot about why you may want to be a lawyer and can be really supportive about your application and kind of give us a little bit more insight of why you want to go to law school and how long they have seen this desire to go to law school. So those letters can actually play also a supportive role in the application process. There are diversity statements where if for schools that allow it, we allow it as an optional statement. It's not a required statement. And it's another place for students to include information as to how they contribute to the diversity of our student body. And that's a very kind of open-ended question here at Miami. Obviously, we are in Miami. We are a very diverse school, and we attract students from all walks of life. So we have a very open-ended prompt to an extent that if you want to submit that statement, you can really talk about how you contribute to that very diverse experience here at Miami. And in terms of other Other statements, the addendums are obviously very important pieces of the application. We are open to addendums, but also ensuring that students have the opportunity to explain matters in their application, whether are related to character and fitness, which is a required disclosure or statement, and or a situation in which, you know, there are other things to explain, gaps in time in their college experience, or undergraduate performance that maybe is not reflective of the type of student that they would be in law school, and they want to explain kind of what was going on during that time and why their performance is not reflective of the type of student that they would be in our program. And there are a million other things to an extent that students can explain, and that's certainly part of the consideration. And it sheds some light about obstacles overcome and how that may have impacted your general, you know, academic performance. At Miami, we actually have a specific question that's again optional for students, where students are able to share any obstacles that they have faced, or barriers overcome that they want to discuss as part of their application. We also have an optional question about significant writing experience for those that have had really great writing opportunities. Writing is such an important skill in law school, and we want to make sure that we reward students that maybe have had significant writing experience. So there's a question dedicated to that. We also have a question dedicated to public advocacy or public service as well. And so students who want to really detail information about how they have been a public servant before and what type of experience they bring. We have an amazing program in public service, is the Hope Center. So I would certainly want students to, if you're interested in that type of work, and social justice issues is a great program here at Miami. And they have their own scholarship program as part of our merit-based scholarship offering. So that's why those questions are also part of our application process. So it's a little bit of a lot of different types of questions that we have. And the idea is to just really provide more space for students to showcase what they bring as a student and how they're going to contribute to our student body.
Yeah, I think that was a loaded question as well, but thank you so much for answering those. What are your views on informational interviews? You mentioned, of course, that, okay, great, you can reach out to admissions officers, and also what was that, 24,000 your alumni home base. What are the benefits of applicants seeking those calls when they're aiming to apply to Miami Law, or probably any law school? Yep.
So we do not have a formal interview process unless the committee reaches out to you. So there are instances where the committee requires an interview, whether it's because they need clarification on a question, or for some of our scholarship offerings, they require an interview. So we don't have a required interview process. However, informational interviews, I definitely think they're a great way to ensure that you get some visibility in the process. And I think often students wait until it's a little bit too late in the process. So they wait until they have been waitlisted, or maybe things haven't gone their way, they may have been denied, and then they're requesting the informational interview. I think the informational interview is best used when you are a prospective student and you are learning about the program, and it's still not in the middle or at the end of the cycle. You're kind of ahead of the cycle. So we want to reward your time and make sure that, you know, right now in the summer when it's kind of slower in terms of we are still not quite in the application cycle yet. So students who are reaching out to us, they get us because we are maybe less committed to other students right now, because we're in at the end of one cycle and almost at the beginning of the next. So those students are getting 30-40 minutes with us, being able to answer questions. And it's not just to make an appointment and to get to talk to us. To an extent, it's not really intended for that. It's intended to give you an opportunity to learn about our program. If you're genuinely interested and you genuinely want to know how you can stand out in our application process, these meetings can be instrumental to kind of review what are maybe the weaknesses of your application, what are things that we advise. Being that it's June ahead of a whole application cycle, we still feel like we're in a position to give you the most comprehensive advice, because we can tell you, we think you need to take the LSAT one more time, or we think that maybe you should focus on this part of your background in terms of your personal statements. When we are in the fall and we're traveling, we're going to your campuses, we're able to have these conversations, but we're getting a lot more requests. So then the time is more limited, and also availability, but maybe more limited. At Miami, we have a fairly large team in admissions. So we actually have our Calendly out there on our website. So you can easily make appointments with any member of my team, including myself. And we're always kind of happy to have that one-on-one time. Most admissions officers record those conversations. I don't mean like record, like Zoom record, but they, make a note on your file and ensure that it's documented that the conversation took place. And if the conversation went well, it's likely that we'll make a remark about that. And eventually, when your file is reviewed, often schools merge those notes with the reviewer notes, so the reviewer may be able to see the fact that you came on campus at the very least, and may be able to see other information about the interview. It doesn't always happen, and some schools have a very clean line of separation in terms of the notes that are from meetings versus the notes that are from reviews. But often they get mixed in terms of where they land in the electronic file, and the reviewer may have access to it. So the reviewer will be able to see, the student was on campus, they showed interest and so on. And if they were concerned about your interest, that may be the item that like, okay, they're definitely interested. They came on campus and they visited, they sat in a class. So they clearly have an interest, even if they didn't say so on their personal statement. So sometimes it can actually balance out your application in that way.
Yeah, because right now the admission cycle is a bit slower, right? And then it will pick up starting this fall. What are your predictions, especially now that we've just gone through COVID and all? What are your predictions for the cycle starting this fall?
So I think a lot of people were surprised by the competitiveness of the current cycle. And we have many applicants who were wonderful applicants, but applied after February. And I do think that this cycle was not kind to them. We had a lot of applicants this cycle that applied really early in the process. Many of those applicants actually came from the previous cycle. And because of the pandemic and maybe not being able to take the LSAT in time for, a host of reasons, they were pushed up to the next cycle, and they were actually the first applicants for the current cycle. So I think a lot of the later applicants were in a position where they did not realize that they were going to face so much competition applying to law schools. So now those applicants are ready to apply September 1st, and they're ready to click, submit. And so I expect many early applications this year. Again, as many as last year, probably not, but certainly a healthy number of applicants. At least at Miami Law, I've talked to a number of applicants who have really, were really surprised by the amount of applications that they were facing by the time they applied. And they are now planning to reapply in the fall. The advice that I gave them was reapply in the fall really early, be one of the first people to come in. Miami does have a binding program for those that Miami is their number one choice. So we also have that due November 1st. And I think that if students are really interested in an institution, you want to be able to control what you can, which is submit the application early, and your final LSAT score, no later than October if you're applying for the binding program, but also ensuring that you are in that fall group as much as you can. I mean, I know that students have different timelines, but the beauty of the LSAT now is that you can schedule it at several times in the year. I mean, when I took the LSAT, it was like a 4 times a year thing. So it was much harder to kind of plan around the timeline. Now you have a gift. You can take the LSAT and multiple times a year in a way that you're able to, or multiple times in the fall in a way that you're able to really plan around the cycle. So I do think that students should focus on that timeline and ensuring their application is early. I think this year, February again, may be late. So if you're out there and hesitating about when to study and when to submit your application, I would say focus on what you can really manage right now, which is study for the LSAT. Make sure that you take it, once or twice ideally, and you're doing all of that by the fall so that your application is by that golden timeline, which would be Thanksgiving. I mean, students who apply before Thanksgiving generally have the best chances for admission because they are coming really early in the process, and it's typically for many law schools still a timeline in which merit-based scholarship process is just starting. So there's availability at that point for review and so on. And you're not facing the issue that happened this year, where by the time students applied February, March, the schools were running out of space. They already had given a great majority of their admissions decisions. They may not have had any merit-based scholarship left at the time that they were applying. I mean, things may have opened up a little bit later, but at that time, it was hard for those applicants. So my recommendation for this cycle, knowing that, is learn from the 2021 cycle and make sure that you're applying early in the process, ideally before Thanksgiving if you can.
Okay, early. That's a good one. And you talked about how this admissions cycle was a bit competitive. Do you think that has to? Well, of course, one part of it is COVID, right? How has COVID also impacted the law school experience as a whole?
I think so. To an extent, the pandemic has really changed a lot of what law schools can do in terms of accommodate the classroom experience. And law schools had many variances in terms of what flex schedules meant for law schools. At Miami, we were lucky enough, being led by a president of an institution who really has a lot of experience with pandemic, and we were able to change our process and our protocols fairly quickly. So our 1Ls got to be on campus this past year. And it wasn't 100% in person. It was partially in person and certainly online. And balancing that, I think, was a new challenge for this class that, no other law school class to an extent has had to manage that hybrid process. We did have an online section as well, so they were fully online. And that was, I would say, a challenging experience. Law school is challenging enough. I do think that having to balance hybrid with in-person, having to, manage generally a different type of arrangement in law school was a transition for faculty and for students. So it's what had to be done under a pandemic situation, but it's certainly a challenge.
Yeah, I think everybody adjusted and had to make adjustments based on what happened last year. I know you said this already, but what would be, even if you say reach out, ask for help, I mean, as a law student, it would be like some people are still nervous to reach out to admissions offices, especially those probably that they are really aiming to pursue. So there's a wall there, I think. What would be your advice to students who need additional information, especially now that although it's picking up, people are going to start going to law schools already. They can sit in a class soon. But now with certain challenges like this, do you think it's as easy as getting on the phone, sending that email, if they want to know more about that particular law school?
I think law schools generally are well prepared to take inquiries from students. So, and you have nothing to lose. Send an email, make a call. What's the worst case scenario? That you don't get the answer that you want, or you don't get an answer? Then maybe you move on to talk to another law school. To an extent, there's 200 law schools in the country, and our job is to answer your questions. Maybe not within the hour, but most law schools have a good policy in terms of returning emails within 24 to 48 hours. Sometimes some weeks are a little bit slower than others, but generally you can reach out. So I would encourage students to do that. We also take a lot of time, especially coming up, to schedule events where we are in a position to answer students' questions about the application process and so on. And we try to do our events timely with the application cycle. So most law schools out there are putting events on application 101 and the personal statement and the resume. If you're really interested in a particular school, attend their event. They're putting all this effort to put an event for you, attend. And now that we have a good balance between in-person and online, you don't even have to come on campus. Obviously, coming on campus has a benefit in terms of being in the school that you may want to be part of. And we are spending so much time thinking about the events. Most schools have safety protocols that we have to follow. So we want to make sure, we are dedicating so much more time to thinking about events that we probably did before, because there are all of these protocols that we do have to follow, that we want you to take advantage of those events. So to an extent, I would say, attend those events. They're intended for you and to answer your questions. And if you don't, have your questions answered, or you have other questions and you want to spend personal time, then reach out. I mean, it's not, I always say, what's the worst case scenario? You have nothing to lose. Go ahead and reach out and we'll take it from there. And coming up in the fall, there's going to be a lot more opportunities that we have had probably in the last year. The LSAC forums are going to come up virtual again, and some in person. We're going to have some in-person events in terms of schools around the country that may have actual recruitment fairs, and take advantage of those opportunities, because we are sending representatives to those events when we are able to attend those events. So you can check the list of schools and you're able to actually meet people in a lot of different law schools at one event. So that's certainly something that I encourage also to keep an eye out. It's still early in June. So I would say that probably by early August, late August, the schedule will be available. You can find it on lsac.org. They actually keep track of a lot of the recruitment events available nationwide. So you'll be able to check it there and be able to connect with the different law schools. For the particular law schools that you're interested in, most of us in the next month, we are putting up all of our events for the fall. Miami Law just posted all of their events for the fall. So you'll be able to sign up if you want to come on campus, or if you want to participate in one of our online events.
Thank you so much, Dean Schral. We still have a few more minutes. I see Ben here, Claudia, and Emily. I'm just opening up the floor to anybody who wants to ask questions, especially since Dean Schral is here to answer those questions.
Good
Anyone?
afternoon.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the insight. I think it's very helpful to hear from an admissions perspective. What is your opinion on a non-traditional student who has been out of school for 13 plus years and is getting back into the admissions and the LSAT and the application process?
I think especially for a student who's been out of, kind of an academic experience, it's important to be in touch sooner rather than later, to really learn about kind of how that school evaluates the different aspects. At Miami Law, we have several students that have a lot of work experience. I think the majority of our class actually has at least 3 years of work experience. So to an extent, it's having work experience is a valuable aspect of your application. So I would say don't fit so much under the non-traditional label, because to an extent, you may be the applicant that we're looking for, and the work experience may be something that actually ends up being very much a plus factor in your application. So don't underemphasize it because you think that somehow it's going to be looked at differently than the student that doesn't have that, is just coming out of college. Most employers nowadays actually want students with work experience after college. So it's going to be an important factor of your application, and you should actually make sure that you highlight it and how that experience has actually enriched your background as a student that is going to have a lot to contribute in our classroom. I do think that most students who have been out of school for a while face some challenges. The more obvious challenges, you've been outside of an academic setting for a while. and whether you are ready to kind of join that academic setting. I think in most cases, probably your work schedule was going to be a lot more than your school schedule. So yes, you're ready. And I think going more into the application specifics, you have to be more diligent in terms of your background and making sure that you are really explaining how that contributes to why you want to go to law school. You have so much more to say because you have more experience than many other students, that you really want to think about what you want to highlight in the personal statement. And that may be a very school specific question. So it's worth setting up a time, especially in the summer with the schools that you're interested in applying to find out more about how they value students with work experience and what is the best way to highlight it, whether it's the resume, whether there are ways to highlight it on the personal statement, whether you should write a diversity statement for that school. Those answers will vary by the different schools that you may be interested in. So I certainly would encourage you to set up time to talk to the individual schools that you're thinking about and seeing how those different aspects of your application may be reviewed differently by those programs.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Of course.
Anybody? I see someone raising their hand, or was that, yeah, Emily?
Hi, thank you so much for your insight. Like, it's really comforting to hear how exciting an admissions officer is to like receive questions and for students seeking help. This is kind of a niche question, but I have a lot of like friends and family like from Miami. I'm not personally from Miami, but I know how important Spanish culture and like the Spanish language is in the area. And I was wondering how important that might be, or like having another language on the application could be in terms of the admissions process.
So it's not a required component of our application. And although Miami, there are a lot of people that speak Spanish, there are over 100 languages spoken in Miami. Miami is truly a very international city. So do we encourage students to speak a foreign language? Sure. Does the foreign language sometimes open the door to share kind of more experiences that you have had as an applicant? Sure, but it's not a required component. It's not required to the extent that if you don't speak a second language, it doesn't mean that you're somehow excluded from being admitted at Miami Law. And we do have language opportunities actually while you're a student here. So if you are interested in learning a second language, we actually have resources here for students that want to explore that. We have a very strong international law program here, and we have courses, which is Spanish for Lawyers courses, available for those that kind of want to take that on as part of the program. But it's not in any way the only way to lawyer in Miami. And many of our students do not speak Spanish. And I would say the majority of our students do not speak Spanish, but it's an asset in an international city like Miami. So it's to an extent, I wouldn't worry about it in the application process. It's not something that we are in any way giving additional points for in the application process. So if you do not speak Spanish, it's not a concern.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Anybody else? Well, if we don't have any other questions, if you can, we'll probably share this. We will definitely publish this online in the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel, and we are also going to share the contact details of Dean Katrine Shaw, so that you can reach out to her, start asking her questions that she says that she can accommodate, especially at this time when it's a bit slow. Thank you so much, Dean Katrine Shaw, for joining us today. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that we haven't covered?
No, I think you had great questions today. I think, like I said earlier, I can only emphasize that we're here to help you navigate the process. So reach out, take the time to attend events that we plan, take the time to learn about our programs, and especially in the summer, it's a great time to reach out and really understand the entire application process a little better. So when you get it, you get started in the fall, when you're submitting your application, it's not so daunting and you really have a better understanding of the process. If you're really, really early in the process and you still not even sure whether law school is going to be for you, I still think it's timely to connect with admissions officers, go to events, sit in a law school and see if you feel like that's what you want to spend 3 years of your life. I think that the best way to open your eyes to the law school experience is to sit in a class. So I can encourage students to do that. You don't have to wait until you're an applicant to do that. I actually think prospective students should always do that before they even consider applying to law school. Get to know what a law school experience is like. Talk to a law student. We have, most of our law schools have programs available with student ambassadors where you can get to meet them. They're part of all of our on-campus events. So those are really great opportunities, again, to connect with the experience and make sure that you have a good understanding of what it entails. And hopefully you'll meet people like me along the way that are there to encourage you. And again, to just help you ease through the process and ensure that you have the tools that you need to have a successful application process.
Thank you. This was really encouraging to me and so many other students. So thank you so much, Dean Katrine Schral.
Absolutely. It was very nice to meet you. Thank you for the time.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.